Good morning, everyone. I'll be presenting on simultaneous dissolution permeation measurements to predict in vivo performance of poorly soluble drug products. I'll start by discussing some background first, then dive into simultaneous dissolution and permeation concept, then talk about disoflux, its components, and how that can be used in these dissolution permeation studies. And at the end, we'll discuss a case study. It is known now that majority of the new chemical entities which come from drug discovery, they belong to either BCS class 2 or 4 type of drugs. These are called as poorly water soluble drugs. For such poorly water soluble compounds, various physicochemical factors and physiological and biochemical processes work either independently or jointly and are responsible for successful oral delivery, which is typically measured in terms of bioavailability. Now, the physicochemical factors are attributed to the formulation, whereas the physiological and biochemical processes are a part of the in vivo environment of the individual. So there are ways in which the formulation can be modified or changes can be done in the formulation to improve the undesirable physicochemical properties that API has. So here in this slide, mention the most commonly employed strategies to improve the undesirable physicochemical properties. The first being solubility enhancement. So for solubility enhancement, the feasibility of salt formation, use of amorphous solid dispersions, use of surfactants, and preparation of lipid-based formulations is evaluated. Second being to increase the lipophilic nature of the API. Various permeation enhancers or the use of chemical modifiers is investigated. The downside of increasing the API solubility is watching out for precipitation. So, the degree of supersaturation which is achieved and the potential use of precipitation inhibitors has to be investigated. Lastly, it is required or it is essential to maintain high concentration gradient across the intestinal wall to ensure drug permeation. So when these formulation strategies are employed, there are different in vitro approaches which can be followed to evaluate these formulation changes and see the differences. The first being solubility measurements in various buffers and physiologically relevant medium. For example, the media can be dissolution medium, the pharmacopoeial media such as simulated gastric fluid and intestinal fluid, and more compositionally biomimicking media such as FASIF and FESIF. Second being dissolution testing. So now for poorly water soluble drug products, typically unconventional dissolution methods have to be thought of or have to be performed, which include conducting the dissolution studies in a large medium volume, for example 2 liter and 4 liter media volumes, or using advanced dissolution apparatus such as a USP4 open loop configuration which provides the required infinite sink conditions. Also, in certain cases, for example, in amorphous solid dispersions, both the in vitro dissolution data and PBPK model have to be utilized or coupled to get better in vivo predictions of the spring and the parachute action that these formulations have in vivo. Lastly, as part of the absorption measurements, there are several studies which can be performed. For example, gastrointestinal aspiration studies, which actually involves aspirating a sample of the GI fluid and analyzing the drug concentration. There are various in vitro tools and in silico models that are available and which can help simulate the GIT drug behavior. To understand digestion or breakdown of excipients such as lipids, a digestion test can be performed using a pH stat apparatus. Lastly, there are coupling techniques which involve simultaneous measurements of dissolution and permeation. We'll be focusing more on such techniques ahead in the presentation. So when we say simultaneous dissolution and permeation measurements, as the name suggests, it involves measuring the API dissolved and API permeated concomitantly or simultaneously. In vivo, both these processes occur in parallel one or parallel or simultaneously. In vitro models evaluating dissolution rate and flux are considered to be more promising to predict in vivo outcomes, and this is based on a lot of literature. A lot of literature data is available stating this. So the entire concept of simultaneous dissolution permeation measurements, it was coined by Jinsky and Pauly in the year 1999, and since then a lot of research has been conducted on evaluating the effect of pH change, effect of food, effect of dosage form on oral drug absorption. So when performing such experiments, we need to use permeation barriers, and there are different types of permeation barriers which are present. So the most commonly and most widely used is the Keiko-2 cell model. This is primarily used to study API absorption and efflux from the basolateral to the luminal side. But when we are using Keiko-2 cell model, there are certain limitations which has to be taken into consideration. First, the surfactants, if present in case of lipid-based formulations, they disrupt the Keiko-2 cell barrier and the results can be compromised. Nextly, it is a time-consuming assay. So to grow the cells alone, it takes 21 days, and also the reproducibility from lab to lab is a concern when using this Keiko-2 cell model. The second model being used is a synthetic model, which is PAMPA model. Stands for Parallel Artificial Membrane Permeability Assay. This barrier has a mixture of commonly found phospholipids in the GIT. The third model is PVPA model, which is a phospholipid vesicle-based permeability assay. In this, the phospholipid vesicles are impregnated on a stationary support membrane, making it more biomimicking. So after understanding the different barriers, there are certain challenges which exist in the use of available apparatus for simultaneous dissolution and permeation measurements. So these all the apparatus which are made are typically in-house apparatus. So they are made to suit the complexities and to meet the required objectives from lab to lab. Because of the differences in the apparatus in terms of the donor and receptor chamber design, the donor and receptor chamber volumes, the variable surface area which is available for permeation, the interlaboratory comparisons become difficult. Also, finished formulation testing is a limitation of most presently available options. So these existing challenges, they directly have an impact on product development, especially in case of generic formulations. We need to have time and cost saving approaches to develop safe and efficacious products and get them into the market in a timely manner. So here we'd like to introduce Dissoflux, which is a tool to measure simultaneously the dissolution rate of the API as well as the permeation rate or the flux of the API. So your Dissoflux is placed on a 8th station dissolution tester, which is this trusty model. In the following slide, we'll understand the different components of Dissoflux. There is a permeability chamber, there is a membrane cap which holds the barrier, there is an overhead stirrer, and there is a sampling cannula. So this permeation chamber is filled with a permeation sink buffer. This permeation chamber is placed in a 1 liter dissolution vessel. Depending upon the volume of the dissolution media, either the short permeation chamber or the long permeation chamber can be used. This can be actually later seen or and understood properly in the video which is following in 2 slides. So Dissoflux can support a wide variety of barrier types. One can be the BioWise GIT phospholipid solution, which has to be impregnated on a support membrane, and then that membrane has to be placed in the membrane cap. The second can be a PermeaPad barrier, which comes as a pre-made barrier. These are all mostly based on Pampa type of membrane. Any other synthetic barrier can also be used. In case of buffers or sink buffers which are to be added in the permeation chamber, either the BioWise permeation sink buffer can be used or any user specific medium which provides the desired or necessary sync conditions to attract the API from the dissolution side to the permeation side can be used. So now let us see a short video on assembling the Disoflux compartments and starting the Disoflux experiment. This is a regular 1 liter dissolution vessel. This is the short permeation chamber. This is the long permeation chamber. In Disoflux, either permeation chamber is placed in the dissolution vessel. The dissolution compartment and the permeation compartment are separated by a biomimicking barrier through which the dissolved drug permeates or diffuses from the dissolution side into the permeation side. A short permeation chamber can be used for high label claim products with dissolution medium volumes of 900 ml or appropriate volumes mimicking the fed state. A long permeation chamber can be used for low label claim products with dissolution medium volume of 500 ml or appropriate volumes mimicking fasted state. Both short and long permeation chamber consists of three components: the chamber or the tube itself, the slant membrane cap, and a washer. The slant membrane cap, it avoids air entrapment under the chamber and ensures unhindered API diffusion when this chamber is placed in the dissolution vessel. The membrane cap also holds the GI mimicking membrane or barrier. Other than this, there is a sampling cannula and an overhead stirrer which actually helps, both of which are present in the permeation chamber, and they help mix the solution and remove samples from a homogeneous solution. And with these two can be seen in the instrument demo later. Let us now assemble one permeation chamber. Take the slant membrane cap. Place the support membrane in the cap. Activate the membrane with the BioWise GIT phospholipid solution. So the BioWise GIT phospholipid solutions comes in this vial. Rotate the membrane cap so the solution is exposed surface. Upon activation, the membrane becomes translucent. Place the washer in the membrane cap and load the membrane cap onto the permeation chamber. So once the membrane cap is secured on the chamber, we have to add in the permeation sink buffer. The BioWise permeation sink buffer comes as these powder concentrates. We have to reconstitute it with deionized water and adjust the pH to 7.4. So this is the reconstituted permeation sink buffer. Other appropriate buffers which can provide sufficient sink conditions to drive the API diffusion across the barrier can also be used. Permeation chamber is now prepared and ready. Let us load this on the Disoflux. This is the Disoflux instrument. Here, this is the sampling cannula for the permeation chamber, and this is the overhead stirrer. The prepared permeation chamber can be loaded onto the Disoflux. It's good to start the test now after loading the chamber. Starting the test and dropping the tablets. The dissolution samples are taken by the auto sampler. Sampling from the permeation chamber is done manually. Replenishments are possible through the same hole back into the same permeation chain. The dissolution data can be plotted as percent API dissolved with respect to time. The permeation data can be plotted as average permeated amount with respect to time. So now that we have understood how to set up a dissolflux and conduct a test with dissolflux, let us understand through a case study how to get the data, what data to get, and how to interpret the data to in vivo. So here for the case study, we had taken a tablet dosage form which consisted of a BCS class 2 drug belonging to, it was an anti-cancer drug. So the label claim for this particular formulation is 5 mg. And there were two products, two test products which were formulated, test product 1 and test product 2. They were made with minor differences in the manufacturing process. And both these test products were compared to the RLD, and it was an immediate release formulation. So here the dissolution conditions and the permeability conditions are given in these tables. To highlight few points, the medium used for dissolution was 0.1% SLS in water and 500 ml medium was used. So a longer permeation chamber was used with permeation sink buffer, 20 ml of that, and the BioVise phospholipid solution was used on a support membrane as the barrier. The time points was 60 minutes, were different for dissolution and permeation. The dissolution was done till 60 minutes and the permeation was extended up to 1 day. Again, from dissolution, a different sample volume was withdrawn and replenishments were carried out at each and every time point. Whereas from the permeability chamber, no, zero point 0.4 ml was withdrawn at each time point and no replenishments were done. Both dissolution and permeability samples were analyzed by HPLC. So from the in vitro dissolution data, it was the y-axis has average cumulative drug release with respect to time on the x-axis. So we can see the curve for dissolution profile for RLD, more than 85% of the drug released in about 15 minutes. Then for test product 1, we see that the profile is slightly different than the RLD, and compare with the test product 2. So test product 2 actually has some overlap with the RLD in the earlier time points as compared to test product 1. So following the dissolution data, the in vitro permeation, so the samples which were withdrawn from the permeation chamber, the concentration of that was also analyzed. And in this graph here, we have plotted average amount which is permeated with respect to square root of time. So we get such a curve. So this is for the RLD. This is for test product 1 and for test product 2. Similar to dissolution, we can see in permeation also test product 2 was slightly more closer towards the RLD as compared to test product 1. And the slope of this line, it actually gives us the flux value. So for each, this table shows the average flux value for each of these formulations. So test product 1, 2 and RLD. From the average flux value also, it can be seen that test product 2 was more closer to the RLD as compared to test product 1. So now when we have this in vitro data, the next objective was if we could predict the in vivo performance based on what we had in vitro. So the way this is done is we selected a flux ratio as a parameter and we compare this parameter to in vivo Cmax, the Cmax parameter of in vivo studies. So for the how the flux ratio was calculated is the ratio stands for each test product was actually compared with the RLD. So here in this case, the flux ratio was calculated from test product 1 in comparison to RLD, and a mean flux ratio of 75.03% was obtained, which lies slightly below the acceptable limit of 80%. the 90% confidence interval of this flux ratio was calculated, and here is where it stands. So seeing the in vitro flux ratio data, it was we assume that the formulation is not going to pass in the bio studies, and here we are comparing it to actual in vivo data, and this is the data on Cmax. So the average Cmax or the mean Cmax lies very close to the 80% mark, and these are the 90% confidence intervals. So based on both in vitro and actual in vivo studies, this test product 1 failed in the bio studies. Whereas let us see for test product 2, again in a similar fashion, the flux ratio was determined comparing test product 2 and RLD, and the average flux value that was obtained, average flux ratio that was obtained, that falls between 80 and 125%. However, the lower end of the 90% confidence interval just lies a little under the 80% acceptable limit. So based on this data also, even if the average flux ratio lies in between the limits, because the lower end falls below the, it was expected or predicted that this would fail in the bio studies. And from the in vivo data also, we come to know that this particular formulation has it is on the lower end, it is failed bio, because we can call this a borderline failure because it's marginally failed in the bio studies. So when it comes to in vitro prediction, we were able to predict for both the test product 1 as well as for test product 2. The prediction accuracy in case of test product 2 was quite higher as like as compared to test product 1. So to summarize the findings of these case studies, first, that we could observe differences between the dissolution profiles of test product 1 and 2 compared to the RLD. Test product 2 seemed to match more with the RLD. The in vitro flux ratio was correlated to the in vivo Cmax parameter, and in vitro prediction of in vivo study outcomes was achieved for both test products. So now we know that in vivo Cmax is one of the in vivo parameters, and along with that AUC and Tmax are two other important parameters. So uh, as directions for future research, we would like to actually correlate, and we're working on this, on correlating the in vitro data to in vivo AUC data to achieve more stronger in vitro predictions. And we are also implementing time shifting and scaling functions, and draw correlations between the in vitro Tmax which is observed and the in vivo Tmax which is observed. So the key takeaways from these presentations are that for finished oral dosage formulations, we can estimate in vitro dissolution rate and permeation rate or flux simultaneously in a reproducible manner. And it has been showed that this has more potential for better in vitro in vivo correlation. We definitely can gain more insights into in vivo product behavior and performance, and this all is going to help us bridge gap between in vitro studies and in vivo studies, and help develop formulations which are safe and efficacious. So thank you for your time and attention, and would take questions now. Thank you.